Hey, everybody, welcome to tonight's Late Night Happy Hour. Brian Kamenetzky and Andy Kamenetzky, joined tonight by Jason Jones, covers the NBA and the Sacramento Kings for The Athletic. I, of course, am joining you tonight from my floor in an effort to try to plug into an Ethernet cable and get better Wi-Fi, or no Wi-Fi, I should say. But
are you lying on the floor?
I am sitting on the floor. I'm not lying on the floor is too much.
I mean, but that would be a really interesting angle. Like if you were actually on your back right now, lying on the floor.
I'll give people the view. This is the kitchen.
Okay.
In the kitchen.
All right, stop messing with your Wi-Fi. You already crapped it out. You're 20 seconds into this thing.
Yeah, lying on the floor would have been very impressive, though.
Yeah, it would have been. But anyway, so as I mentioned, joining us tonight, Jason Jones. Long Beach Poly's own, we were just reminiscing about your football career and all the pros that played with you while you were down there.
Yeah, I had a couple of guys. It was funny. One of them was Marcus Anderson, who went to UCLA, played for the Packers, and then eventually at one point played for the Raiders. So I'm covering the Raiders at that point, and I'm covering my high school teammate, which was very interesting.
Were you guys close? I mean, like, did you?
I mean, we knew. I mean, we weren't like tight or anything like that, but we were on the same team for 2 years, so we knew each other well enough. And I'd written about him when I was in college. I wrote a story about him after the whole UCLA handicap parking scandal.
Oh yeah,
because he was a part of that, and it was a tricky thing because back then, he clearly didn't want to talk about it, but he knew me, and we were at the same age, so it was the college papers. He talked to me about it. I talked to his whole family. I'd actually met his father when I was a young kid, way before I met Marcus, because his dad did a lot of community work and like mentoring type stuff. And I was in some like summer camp, and his dad spoke to us. So I'd met his dad way before I met Marcus.
So like you said, you graduated in '96.
Yeah.
So that's like after the era of like Snoop and Cameron Diaz and like all these different people out in Long Beach.
Yeah, we were the group after that. So I went to high school with Snoop's younger brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we were like, the group, the kind of the generation after that when they filmed the What's My Name video, a bunch of us, not me, but a bunch of guys did cut class because the video was filmed right across the street from Poly.
So like during that period, was that Snoop starting to rise and everybody hearing about his, your class? I don't know which Brodus he is, but I don't know his first. I don't know his first name, but the younger. Are people starting to hear about the younger Brodus's older brother?
Yeah. Oh, by that point, yeah, because that was about my junior year. By then, he was the biggest thing in the rap at that point. I think Deep Cover came out. I was probably in 8th grade, and that was the big deal because we had never seen a rapper with a Long Beach hat on. So we were like, "Oh, y'all see that video with the Long Beach hat?" And then by the time we got to high school, he was the biggest rapper in the world. So yeah, that was a big source of pride for the Poly kids. We played Snoop, Dub, Shaq, Warren G, all that. Every bus trip, I think Summertime in LBC came out before my senior year, so every road game, that was our song.
That is cool.
Can I say something?
We had a cool bunch there.
Can I say something that's going to sound kind of stupid? And I realize it sounds stupid. I don't picture, like you talk about Snoop and all these, with a lot of famous people, I don't picture them as somebody who have like little brothers or like big brothers. So you know what I'm saying? It's like he's like this person, like you forget they're like people who have families and brothers and sisters and parents. Like Snoop is just like this icon onto himself at this point. The idea that like he has a little brother that people went to high school with just felt odd.
Because we're from the same neighborhood we're both from the east side of Long Beach. So we're from the same neighborhood. And actually the one time I met Snoop, I was still in high school. He was just like hanging out at the record store VIP, just hanging out. It wasn't like he had an entourage. He was just there. So it's to see him now hanging out with Martha Stewart, and it's like, I remember when he was just Snoop.
I was just going to say, like, it's a toss-up between Snoop, Mike Tyson, and like Ice Cube in his own right in terms of when they broke out to where they are now, like the transformations that you could never see coming. Like Snoop being this ubiquitous pitch man, who works with Martha Stewart. Like he and Martha Stewart have become this odd couple. Ice Cube becoming this family-friendly comedy fixture, or like Mike Tyson, like what Mike Tyson ended up reinventing himself as, like, putting aside the issues that, Snoop and Mike Tyson dealt with early in their careers and early in their fame, like, however much you can compartmentalize that, just the actual transformation is unbelievable.
Yeah, you couldn't have told me back in high school that Snoop would be hanging out with Martha Stewart, or when I have kids, they would see Snoop as like this friendly, lovable, like, wow, it's Snoop. I was like, no, like I said, I was in the 90s. I remember the murder trial.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Or okay, how about this one? Ice-T has become one of the longest running cops on TV. The guy who wrote Cop Killer has become one of the most, he's become one of the most iconic cops. Like, that's just nuts.
Well, Cube plays like lovable dad characters now in movies.
Yeah, and like I said, when I was a kid, I wanted to be Ice Cube, and you couldn't have told me back in 91, 92, I'd be watching Cube and Are You There Yet? Or I'd be going back and forth with his son on Twitter about the Lakers and talk. You wouldn't have told me that, because I remember the old album cover where he's posing with his kids, and I'm like, you wouldn't have told me and O'Shea Jackson Jr. would be discussing the Lakers on Twitter.
Yeah, O'Shea's awesome. That dude's great.
Oh my God.
That's crazy.
I don't know anybody who I know. We know a lot of Laker fans just from doing this for a long time. I don't know anybody who gets as into it. And to the point, like they had, I think like it was TNT the other night had like the live cam on him, and you genuinely worry about him, because I mean, I watched the guy eat, like, he'll take down some cheeseburgers and this and that. Like, I don't know, the heart may not be fully prepped for this, and you see him just like his eyes are bugging out. I worry.
Yeah, I saw a couple. I'm like, oh man, somebody check on him. Yeah, and I know when I've watched games where I just can't sit down during the game. I go through that, especially with Dodger games in October. But watching him watch the Lakers, I was like, okay, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, for people who are unaware, Jason, you've maintained your LA sports fandom. I mean, you cover whatever teams the Lakers play objectively and all that. You do your job well, but you are still at heart an LA sports fan.
Oh yeah, I can't rip that out. I mean, Magic Johnson was too big a part of my childhood. The Dodgers, even for me, it was the Raiders. Even though I ended up covering them, which was almost a traumatic experience when you have to cover the team you grew up cheering for. But yeah, I'm LA guy to the core still. I just who I'm going to always be. I'm an LA guy, and I think maybe 20 years ago, maybe people would have been like, oh, you can't say that. But I think now with the way social media and everything is, everyone knows everything about everybody. I mean, my old job put on my bio on the website, I was a Laker fan. So then they put that on my bio on the website and moved me to the NBA. So, of course, the fans received me well with actually telling me to go away and take me and my Kobe love. And we know what happened in 2002. We were robbed, and I usually play nice, but when they get a little feisty with me, I'll tweet the Robert Horry, game 4 if Adam, just to remind them, I mean, it's really petty on my part, and I probably should be above that, but sometimes they get a little personal with me, and I'm like, I'm gonna remind you where I'm from and what happened in that series.
That is amazing. Like, the idea that you have this sort of adversarial relationship with your readers, not because they don't think you do a good job covering the Kings, and you've been doing it for a while with The Athletic, but just the idea that they still hold like 2002 against you personally. Like, this is somehow your fault.
There's some of them who want me to come out and admit that Game 6 was rigged. Like, just admit it. And I say, well, I did watch Game 7. And then they can't beat me in the arguments. I said, what about Game 5 where Weber set a moving screen on Derek Fisher? No, I said, okay. I said, what about this? It's a fun game for me because I really have no personal stake in it. I just think it's funny. And then I always remind them that you can argue with me all you want. Laker fans don't really care about the Kings. I'm like, you're really irrelevant to the Laker fan base, in case you didn't know. I said, you call it a rivalry. It's not really a rivalry if the other team doesn't care about you.
This is amazing. I've never seen a
it
writer
certainly-
unpack
it-
their
maybe it
readership
was
the
a
way
lot,
you
yeah.
I mean,
But it's like,
that's
it
just
might
me.
have
You
been
know,
at
a
some
lot.
point.
It's a fun little game with most of the. It's a fun game with most of them. Now it's all in fun for the most part. There's some of them who still take it a little too seriously. And I have to remind them that, like, you know, I say, well, you know, Lottie was a Laker first. And what I did one time was my first ever autograph from a pro athlete was Lottie. I rode the bus to a Ralph's supermarket and got my Vlade Divac rookie card autograph. So I tweeted that one day and said, just in case you guys forgot, this is where Vlade started. This is where he ended his career.
So did Doug Christie.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know one time, true story, our buddy Sam Amick one time, first time I met Doug, he goes, "Hey, Doug, you know he's a Laker fan." I said, "Hey, Sam, you know Doug was a Laker."
Right.
Like, now that I think about it, a bunch of the dudes from that era, like John Barry was a Laker at one point.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of dudes like played for the Lakers from there, or were Lakers before they were Kings.
Yeah.
So,
or in the case of Mitch Richmond, he ends up a Laker at the end after being a King forever.
yeah. So
But like you say, Andy and I were talking about this on our podcast, the one that came out today. Normally, I mean, we understand that most basketball fans, at the very least, I don't want to say maybe resent is the right word. Laker fans get irritated with Laker fans, don't particularly like Laker fans, and I completely understand why.
Yeah,
but I'm not. Do you think that applies actually to this year's team? I feel like this is maybe the 1 year that people look at this Lakers, particularly given how the Clippers played and went out, and look at the Lakers as like sort of a team that's, for the Lakers, much harder to dislike. Do you get that sense at all?
a little bit, but there's people who still hate LeBron.
That's true.
So it's like you know, I know after they clinched and got to the finals, I was looking on my timeline. It was like this weird mix of Laker haters and LeBron haters who unified. A bunch of them were Warrior fans too. They all jumped into like this unify against the Lakers. But I mean, I don't know how you don't like this. I mean, to me, it's a very likable team. You know,
Extremely
you don't have that villain. Like, you know, Kobe was a villain. People hated Kobe. You know, Shaq made fun of everyone. You know, it reminds me more of back when Magic was playing. It was hard to hate Magic. It's to me, it's hard to hate LeBron or AD just because the way their personalities are. You know, and then, you know, and I have fun with some of the Clipper fans I know too, because I know even before the playoffs started, I kind of just felt like, I mean, I was halfway joking in February. I said, they'll probably lose in the second round. I just felt they were a weird team. I just said something about that team isn't right. So, and I think the way Paul George went out, it took some of that Laker hate and shifted it on the Paul George and the Clippers.
Yeah, we were talking about that on the recent podcast as well. Like the Clippers and the Rockets, I think in these particular playoffs in the West became the heels, and I think the disliked team in the way the Lakers often are, just because of, you know, institutional dominance, and, you know, in the same way the Yankees or the Cowboys can build up that type of resentment. But like you said, Jason, I mean, we've covered this team. They're a very, very likable team. They're very enjoyable to be around, and I can only imagine that comes across when you watch them on TV, if you happen to be inside Staples Center. Like last year's team, for example, had a lot of guys on it that I think were likable in a vacuum, and a lot of them are the same guys that are on this year's team. But that team was not fun or enjoyable to cover in the slightest. It was miserable. And this year's team has been completely different, and it really began with LeBron completely buying in totally anew, like the minute they got Anthony Davis. And to LeBron's credit, I mean, he really set a tone of investment and buying in, and a leadership that was inclusive to everybody that honestly wasn't there last year. But, you know, last year's last year, this year's this year. And you're right. They're a very, very likable team. I mean, I think just objectively they are.
Yeah, I think if you don't like these guys, you just don't like the Lakers, period. And no matter, you know, they could all go out and, you know, feed homeless children, and you just would say they're doing it for clout. You just don't like them. But I find this group to be, you know, you look at Caruso, I think JaVale's, you know, Dwight's story, returning back to the Lakers after the way he went out the first time, just Rondo becoming playoff Rondo. And I know Rondo from when he was with the Kings. I talked to him the last time the Lakers were up.
Interesting experience.
Yeah, actually, Rondo was one of my favorite guys. I'd gotten all these, warnings about how, he's weird, he's different. Me and Rondo hit it off from day one.
How did you do that? Because I can tell you from most people around us covering
that's not an easy thing to do.
No, not at all.
I think it was something really simple. I think it was the first time I had a one-on-one interview with him. They were doing training camp, I want to say, in Santa Barbara, I think. And he was sitting down, sitting down when I was about to start talking to him. I just sat down next to him, and I didn't stand over him. And it was like, he was like, thank you. Because, guys don't like it when they're sitting down and you're standing over them, from there, we just hit it off. And to this day, whenever I see him, we're good. And even when he was playing in Chicago, he had that stretch where they weren't playing him. I went down, he was sitting on the bench. I went over and talked to him. I said, how you doing? He said, I got a good seat like you have. So me and Rondo have always, I got along with Rondo great. And I had heard all these people have warned me, be careful. And, he might be kind of tricky to deal with. I never had one issue dealing with Rondo.
And in that, which is, particularly in that context, because that's often looked at as like, the worst that you got from Rondo. Like what didn't work? Like what was the problem? I understand the team was garbagey, but is it a little bit like the Jimmy Butler thing that we're seeing now, where you just in the wrong environment, what he does and the way he approaches the game just cannot work?
Probably in some cases, but in Sacramento, it's Sacramento. That entire team hated George Karl. So you got an entire team that hates the coach. I don't care, and then the way it all went down, where the season before they'd already fired Malone. They fired Malone pretty much. It was one of the craziest. I still can't believe it went down like that, but it did. They fired Malone. The entire team now has to play for Tyrone Corbin. And I felt bad for Ty, because Ty didn't do anything wrong, but they all hated playing for Ty. And then they get George Karl thrown on them, and they hate playing for George. And so the next season, Rondo comes in, and then Rondo is the point guard. He and George seem to have a good relationship. And then one day we go back to Boston, and they're having a little bit, all the Boston media is asking him about Rondo. And I don't know I think George was kind of being like, tongue in cheek. And because he'd always tell us, before every game at shoot around, I sit down and talk to Rondo. And then in Boston, for whatever reason, George says, and sometimes I wish Rondo would just shut up. and the next day they play the Celtics. I go to the game, and DeMarcus is like, hey, Jay, come here. He goes, did George really say that he wishes Rondo would shut up? I go, yeah. And DeMarcus looks at me and goes, and Rondo's the only guy in here that defends him.
Wow.
And from there, we went to Cleveland after that, and it became a circus. And one of my favorite moments was they got mad at George. Cleveland blew him out that night. And Rondo looks at me and does this. And then he just lays into George about voluntary practices. And that started the whole, they're going to fire George. And the players thought he was going to get fired. And then he didn't get fired.
Well, I remember, George, the best and worst thing about George Karl, depending on the context and how you're looking at it, is he has no filter. And he just says whatever is on his mind. Like I remember years ago, I think it was the 2009 playoffs, the Western Conference Finals, when it was the Lakers versus Denver. Mm-hmm. And this is maybe a year removed. It's like a year removed from when Iverson was on Denver, and then they flipped him for Chauncey. Correct. And I remember there was a pregame media session, and George Karl's talking about how this current Nuggets team is more mature than the previous years. And, they just seem like they have a little more stability. And he's like, and AI, he's just taking guys out and, he's keeping them out all night. And he's going, I'm like, you can tell this story without
why
actually.
Yeah, it's like this doesn't need to be in it.
You don't actually need to say that it was Iverson doing this. Like, you can just say that guys weren't as professional. You don't have to actually give all of the details. And, I'm not going to lie and say I didn't find it entertaining. But at the same time, I'm like, I'm starting to get why this guy who from the outside looking in seems like such a blast, like ends up inevitably bugging the crap out of all of his players. Like,
George is great for us. Somebody told me, he said, you'll never have an empty notebook with George. George was great, even though there was times when George and I bumped heads. He knew I was really good with DeMarcus and the players. And when they were about to play the Clippers, and I was asking about Rudy Gay playing the 4. And he kind of went on this whole thing about guys should just be happy to play. Why do they even care what position I call them? And he says, why are you asking me that? You're going to write whatever you want to write anyway. And I'm like, what did I do to you today, George? And we would have these random where he'd be like, oh, what do you want? What do you want now moments? And then we had a couple of weird moments. One of them was after probably the weirdest one was I had before the last game of the year, my story that came out the day before said he was getting fired because he was going to get fired after that game. So we go to shoot around in Houston. Everyone's looking at me. And I'm like, I have nothing to ask him. He's getting fired tonight. And he's looking at me. I'm looking at him. I'm like, okay. And then, and I think I talked to George this year. It was a great conversation. Like I said, he's great to talk to. And he'll even tell you that probably his biggest problem is that he says too much.
Yes.
I think that's fair. I would agree.
Yeah.
But when you tell stories like that, and like we're all used to, there was drama in the Showtime era, when you especially when you start peeling back, there's just a different era. You didn't see all of it.
Right.
I think we can all agree. Plenty of drama in the three-peat era, well documented. And, there was plenty of Kobe Pow tension and this and that, all the stuff about Black Swan and White Swan. And there was none of that has happened this year with the Lakers. And so when you see this team, and I think Frank Vogel doesn't get nearly enough credit. I mean, obviously, LeBron is sort of the front and center of that, and AD is not the kind of guy who was going to stir up a lot of that. But Vogel's ability it is harder to manage superstars than people give it credit for.
Right.
And Vogel's ability to keep this whole thing completely drama-free all year long, it's been kind of remarkable, I think.
I think so, too. Remember, when he got hired, everyone was saying, well, he'll get fired by February. It'll be Jason Kidd coaching the team. He kind of came in, but I think he took the right approach. He didn't take that personally. He didn't try to come in and prove he was the coach and he was in charge and make some crazy statements about how he was going to tell LeBron what to do. And it was he just kind of just does his job and doesn't, crave or seek the spotlight. And I think when you have a guy like LeBron on as your top player, you're never going to get credit anyway. So just go ahead and do your job and let people say what they're going to say. Don't try to fight that battle of, this guy, I should get more credit. Just go ahead and do your job. And I think Frank's done a good job with that.
He has done a really good job with that. I also think, too, and I've never asked Vogel about this, and I don't think he'd ever say anything on the record about it. But in some ways, when you are perceived, I think, as, very understandably, fourth, fifth choice, and we know he wasn't the first choice because they interviewed other people. Right. And honestly, I think if Jason Kidd hadn't been considered in a lot of ways optically nuclear, he might have ended up the coach anyway.
Right.
But I think Vogel, in a certain way, it was liberating because you could look at it as like, look, I might get fired anyway, or if I'm going to get undercut, if I'm just going to coach my way. I'm just going to do what I want. And ultimately, if I'm a seat holder, I'm a seat holder. So I can't do anything about that. So, there's a certain, I think, freedom that comes with that. And assuming you're actually up to the job, and Vogel was, I still look at this one moment as one of the most important moments of the season for the Lakers this year. In game 2, he sat JaVale McGee to start the second half of a game against Utah and put Anthony Davis at center and ended up putting Caruso, who to that point had only been playing sporadic minutes at all, in the starting lineup for the second half. And this was after everybody knew AD didn't want to play the 5. That's all, and the Lakers had been catering to that.
You're right. Again, before Alex Caruso was widely considered the best player in the NBA.
Right.
Exactly. And this before that happened.
This was before we all knew he was the GOAT.
Right.
But like that took some balls. Like to play that card in game 2 took balls. And it ended up working. But I think that's also the type of thing that you end up getting respect really quickly from guys like LeBron and AD.
I think so too, and it's a way you're asserting that you're the coach and you're in charge, but it's not in a me way. It's a thing where you're saying, you know what, we're trying to win a game. I'm going to do what I have to do to win a game, and then I think it's carried over throughout the season. You see him in the Rocket series. I'm going to move AD to the 5. For the rest of the series, I'm going to start Dwight, and I think because you have the respect of your locker room, you can do things like that, and you don't hear little leaks about players or side-eyeing Frank for this move or that move. Those guys are still engaged on the bench. They're still having a good time. So I think he'll never get any credit for this, but I think he's done a great job. Just like you said, things like that.
Are you surprised at all at how well AD has played throughout the playoffs, just given the spotlight and the pressure and all that?
Not especially, because I think he usually in the postseason he's had good numbers. He just couldn't get in there. And they had that series a couple of years ago against Portland where they destroyed Portland. They just ran into the Warriors after that. But I'm not completely surprised. I just think that because he was down in New Orleans, because he was, and let's be real, a lot of people weren't watching Pelicans games. I mean, they didn't really know how good AD is. I mean, there were people arguing that you don't give up Josh Hart in a deal for AD. I mean, they're like, we can't give up we can't give up Lonzo or Brandon Ingram for AD. And it's and I was like,
who's making these arguments?
I would read certain of the media, and they would be like, no, that's too much. You got to
okay. The too much factor, maybe, and and the deal, the circumstances of that deal ended up so out of control because the trade deadline went just so publicly sideways,
right?
And I don't think the Lakers were negotiating from a place of strength. No. Or you could say Rich Paul was negotiating from a place
or as we learned the other night, LeBron wasn't negotiating from a place of strength.
That's my favorite thing when guys say, when LeBron brought me here.
Well, LeBron
he said
he brought Anthony Davis. But all that being said, like individually, would you trade Lonzo for Anthony Davis? Absolutely. Would you trade BI for AD? I love Brandon Ingram. The answer is yes. Josh Hart, yes. Like the picks, yes. Put it all together. Was it a lot? Yeah. But look at how well Anthony Davis has played in these playoffs. He's been amazing.
Yeah, my take was always that if all the young guys were superstars, there wouldn't be a need for an AD trade. So if you got to package 3 of them together to get the superstar, to me in the NBA, you always go get the superstar, no matter what. You go get the superstar.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're learning. Like in this playoffs, the Lakers have a questionable bench. They've got, you worry night to night where scoring is going to come from. And it's, they don't have, they're short on guards. They've got like 3 guys on the team that can dribble and pass. And like, it's like, that's what they are, but their best players are so good. And like Davis what was he, 6th in MVP voting this year? And has played better than that in the playoffs. And LeBron was 2nd and has played better than that in the playoffs. And when your team has 2 of the 3 or 4 best players on earth, you can get away with a lot of stuff. And it's not football, it's not baseball where you really LeBron gets to bat more than 4 times in one game. And so you see now why teams bend over backwards to get as many of these dudes as possible. And quite frankly, the way LeBron is holding up and the way AD is done, like this doesn't have to necessarily stop this year. Like they actually do have a little bit of a window here, I think.
Yeah, and then that's always my argument about the whole depth argument. People would say, well, the Clippers are better 1 through 10. And I always say, they don't get to play 10 on 5. Five guys,
way of looking at it, actually.
Depth is great on 2K and over the course of a season, but in a 7-game series, you're not going to worry about, okay, well, is the 10th guy gonna hurt me? It's like, okay, 2 minutes to go in the game. Who are your stars? And I think the Lakers are reminding everyone, when you've got stars, that's how you close out a series. Your stars close it out. And you need your other guys to fill in where they fill in, do what they do, but it's still a star league.
So what do you with this finals coming up on Wednesday, Lakers Heat? Like, what about the matchups intrigue you? Like, what are you going to be looking for watching this?
I want to see who starts off defending LeBron and how they kind of cycle through that between Jimmy, Jay Crowder. What do you try with that? And I wonder how they're going to do. The Lakers come out big and force them to put Bam on AD, or do you try to do that little trick where you say, we'll go with a smaller guy like Crowder, and maybe he can stay in front of him, make AD shoot jumpers. So I think I want to see the chess match. I think Spoelstra's a really good coach with things like that, and I want to see who's going to force the hand of the other team first, and how do you get the Lakers to downsize? And if you do, even the Lakers' small team is still a big team.
I call them medium ball.
Yeah, so their version. AD is not a small guy. I mean, if you're using Kuzma and LeBron at forward, that's not small. KCP is not small.
Or Marquise. That was the thing about when they downsized against Houston.
Right,
they were still way bigger. Way bigger. It's not like they went with AD at the 5 and then LeBron and a bunch of guards. Like, they're playing Kuzma, Markieff Morris. These are
small. Frankly, is Miami. Like, Miami has one guy who's listed on their roster as a center, and he never plays. It's Myers Leonard. Nobody else is even. They don't even bother calling anybody else a center.
And like I said, even with Bam is still, I think, too small for AD.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, so it's going to be. I want to see just kind of how they play the matchups. Who goes the zone first? Spo knows LeBron, obviously. And I think.
How much do you think that matters? Like, LeBron's been in the league 17 years. Is there anybody who doesn't really know LeBron's game? Because that's a talking point that's come up. Like, nobody knows. LeBron's never had to play anybody in a finals that knows him as well as Erik Spoelstra, which is true. But I'm trying to figure out if that matters. Like, how many secrets are there at this point?
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot of secrets. I think maybe he may be comfortable coaching against him because he knows him. But I don't think, I think I saw a thing today where they were like, Jimmy Butler, held him to 41% shooting as the nearest defender. I'm like, so? They can pull up all these little stats. Well, this guy historically, in a minimum of 75 times being near LeBron when he shot. It's like, okay, so what?
Well, here's a question in terms of the idea of any advantage Spo may or may not have coaching against LeBron. The way he knows LeBron, like, on a mental personality level, like, as opposed to the way he plays. Like, I agree with Brian. Everybody knows LeBron's game by now. Like, the tape on LeBron has been pretty plentiful at this point. Like,
he's not like when the Cowboys did that preseason scrimmage to the Rams, couldn't see. They did it without numbers, so the Rams couldn't see their players. It's a little different than that,
right? But like the idea that Spo knows LeBron on like a mental personality level better than most coaches who would defend against him. Like, is that something that maybe you can use as a coach? I'm just spitballing. I don't know the answer.
I think so. I think maybe in the sense of maybe he has an idea of what LeBron might be looking for. But like you said, we know in the NBA, everyone knows what everyone does. So even with that, there's only so much you can get. And it's not like Spo's going to go out there and play. So
that's unfortunate for the Lakers.
Yeah,
exactly. I think I would like the Lakers' chances if Spo was guarding LeBron, but I just think
they should actually do that. Like, once a series, the coaches should have to play for 5 minutes.
Can you pick which coach? Can it be Jason Kidd, instead, or the Jason against? I don't know. I forget who's on Miami's staff.
Who is on Miami? Let me look this up. I think Chris Quinn, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Chris Quinn. Any thoughts, by the way, from the kid for him at NYC? Lawrence Funderburk was an underrated King.
Okay.
That's a thought.
Can we quote you on that? let me see if I can find Miami's coaching staff. Because obviously you're right. The ringer for the Lakers would definitely be Jason Kidd. Like he's the one you're throwing out there.
But he had back spasms too, so maybe it's got to be Phil Handy.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe it's Phil Handy because
Phil's a little older though.
Yeah, but he has he doesn't have back spasms.
Okay.
So,
here are your options: Spo, Dan Craig. I'm not sure I know who that is.
Malik Allen.
Malik Allen was in the
player.
league.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chris Quinn was in the league. Shaq notoriously made fun of him. Octavio De La Grana. I have no idea who that is. And their trainer, Jay Sabal, I don't know about his handle.
Is Anthony Carter there, like that Anthony Carter? Because he's their player development guy.
That might be that Anthony Carter because I know.
Yeah,
Ace,
13-year NBA veteran. There you go.
Yeah, there's a nice collection of former Kings coaches and players around the league, and whenever you see them, you go, "Hey, you made it out of here, didn't you?" And so there's always like, "Man, you know how crazy it was." So
were you one of the people that lit a candle for not being able to cover an LA-Miami series, like actually in the cities of LA and Miami?
Yeah, but that's probably good for me. I mean, I don't think my girlfriend would be too happy about the idea of me going between LA and Miami without her, or she'd probably try to figure out a way to go. Like, no, that's not what we're not going to do. We're not going to have you in LA and Miami by yourself. But right. Yeah, I would have loved to have been able to do that.
I mean, it's not by herself. She'd be with you. Just
it wouldn't be by myself. She wouldn't. I wouldn't. Because I mean, I'm from LA, and so. That's an easy one, but yeah, she loves Miami. She's actually a big Dwayne Wade fan. I already told her she has to make a choice.
And what was it?
Lakers.
Okay.
Wow.
All right.
She likes the Lakers more than she likes Dwayne Wade.
Huh. Well, I mean, this is a keeper. This is definitely a keeper. I mean,
if there was any, what date do you bring that out? Like, do is it like a fourth date thing? Like, I need you to pledge allegiance here, either to the Lakers or Dwayne Wade. Before this,
she knew she's actually a Laker fan. She's just a big Dwayne Wade fan. It's like you have I think there's a lot of people I know who, when the Lakers weren't good, they kind of started picking their favorite players around the league, and she's always just liked Dwayne Wade.
Well, he was the closest thing to Kobe. Like during those sort of down years, Dwayne Wade was the closest thing to a shooting guard like Kobe in the league. Mm-hmm. So I mean, if you were looking for like a Kobe prototype on a better team, you could naturally gravitate to Wade, like if that was your style of player, right. Something you enjoyed.
Yeah, but she's also I think she's more of a Gabrielle Union fan than so that kind of like, since she's a Gabrielle Union fan,
we all.
Yeah, exactly. And Dwayne Wade comes along with that, so I think that's a big part of for her too. But she's made her allegiance known.
We should step back and acknowledge how likable a couple that is. Like, who doesn't like Dwayne Wade? Who doesn't like Gabrielle Union?
Yeah, she loves him, and so I just she's like I said, she made the right choice.
Waz says hi, by the way, Jason.
I say I can't wait for the game because we have a thing on Twitter every time the Lakers win, we go back and forth about how does this underdog team do it? How did they overcome? They overcame the greatest 8th seed in NBA history, somehow survived 2 MVPs from Houston, and they actually beat Denver up 3-1, which no other team had done this year.
Did Waz, by the way, Wazny Lambrey over at The Athletic, part of the Count the Dings network, great guy. He's been on the show at least I think a couple times.
He did the show. He did this show once. He did our podcast. And we're going to try to get him back for all of these things because he's awesome.
Is Waz the originator of the We Believe origins? Because I've seen that a bunch of different places, and the jokes carried over everyone. I'm not quite sure who started it.
I don't know if someone else, I think actually, I want to say Logan Murdoch sent that to me first.
Logan Murdoch from The Ringer.
Yeah, I think he was the first one that sent it to me, and then I think he might have posted something about the game, and I think I know I've tweeted it out before, and all my Bay Area people hate me for it. They're like, oh, you think it's funny? We're the We Believe team. I'm like, no, the Lakers are the greatest underdog #1 seed in NBA history. They were supposed to lose to Portland. So
I mean, it's
hilarious.
Epic trolling.
Yeah.
It's
so
yeah.
funny.
Just the concept is so funny.
To me, if you can't troll on social media, what's the point?
That's all this is good for. I mean, you're kidding?
Right.
It's the most toxic place on earth. But the jokes are funny.
Yeah, I'm a Cal grad, so I never spell Stanford correctly on Twitter. And someone actually tweeted at me and said, you spelled Stanford wrong. I'm like, no, I didn't. There's a U in there.
Yeah, the We Believe Lakers thing is so damn funny. I mean, it's just hilarious. And
they might even find it funny.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, look, I think some of this got exaggerated in the sense that, like, Portland was, I think, on paper, before we knew Zach Collins wasn't going to play at all, and before Damian Lillard couldn't finish the series, Portland was a legit tougher than average 8 seed. True. And I think people acknowledging that, and also, too, the Lakers had played like ass.
That's what the Lakers looked like shit when they got
I mean, we're sort of forgetting about this. The Lakers looked legitimately terrible.
They shot like 7% from 3-point range in those 8 games.
And also, too, they didn't have Avery Bradley, who would be one of the natural covers for Damian Lillard. But that being said, like, there were not a lot of people picking Portland. Like, and that's what makes
Charles Barkley. It was Charles Barkley and literally nobody else.
It was still. I still had fun with it. I still had fun with it.
Yeah, I don't want it to ever end. I love the We Believe League. I'm very disappointed that Vegas isn't giving Miami more respect. It's awesome. It's just hilarious. Let me ask you a question that Brian and I were talking about on the most recent podcast, the Orlando Lakers. Who do you think this series is more personal for? LeBron or Pat Riley?
Oh, Pat Riley.
You think so?
I think Pat Riley, this is the same guy who got into it with his biggest Dwayne Wade and let Dwayne Wade walk because they got into it. So I think it's definitely more personal. I think, LeBron's been on 2 different teams now. I always looked at LeBron's years in Miami as a kid who basically never left home for college and finally wanted to live somewhere else. And why not live in Miami? Did his 4 years, in Miami, and he was done with it. I think Pat took that way more personally than LeBron ever could. So, like Waz has pointed out, LeBron won a title without Pat Riley. Pat Riley hasn't won one since.
I agree with that. The main thing that got me wondering about it was just the way Riley dared LeBron to leave and basically turned it into a manhood thing. Like LeBron wasn't man enough to actually stay. And LeBron's got a long memory. I mean, he's been doing this Wash King bullshit this entire year. Like that nobody was saying. Like literally nobody. This was not
like out the one guy who commented on Instagram, "You're washed," and was like, "Okay, I'm washed." Okay.
I mean, like, were people noting, hey, LeBron is coming off the most serious injury of his career, is turning 35 and has a zillion miles on his odometer, so maybe he might be incrementally, very, very gradually getting a little bit in decline? Sure. Maybe. That's not washed. Like, that is not
washed. This, like, if you tell LeBron James that he's the 7th best player in the NBA, you might as well tell him he's washed, because that to him is the same. Like, he doesn't see a distinction between that. So, saying, hey, he's still a top 10 guy. Don't get me wrong. Like, LeBron's like, fuck you. That's not, stop. That's not what we're doing here.
Yeah, it's sort of the equivalent of, I don't mean to sound racist, but at that point, I don't mean to sound like I'm saying you're washed, but.
Right. The minute you start that sentence, he just sees Skip Bayless on your face. Like, that's it. Like, so I don't blame him necessarily, because these guys are, not necessarily rational about how they take certain forms. They all think they're the best player in the world.
Yeah, you can go to the 12 men on the bench and he will tell you exactly why the coach has screwed him over and he should be starting. And you can't get to that level if you don't think like that. They're the two-way player on right now saying, you know what, I should be starting right now. That Giannis guy might be good, but you know what? You give me that same opportunity, I'll do some things with it.
You're talking about Kostas, right?
Of course. That's my joke. When people say, "Well, the Kings should go after Giannis," I said, "Well, they can go after a member of the family, but they're not going to get Giannis." So,
well, how fast do you think Kostas gets released the minute Giannis doesn't sign with the Lakers? I mean, 30 seconds? Does it take a minute? I think it just depends if Rob Pelinka happens to be on Wi-Fi at the moment.
It's like, okay, oh, he's not okay. Like, you know what? It depends if it's during, like, say, summer league. Maybe you let him finish summer league.
You let him finish the game or the whole league?
You pull him off the floor.
That would be the worst thing ever. You get pulled off the floor during summer league because your brother didn't sign. Like, you know what? It's not going to work. You can go ahead and go.
That is especially cruel. Like that feels like you're punishing Kostas for something that he really has no control over.
You are, but hey, that's why not?
And the minute the one, the Theonis or whatever, which there are like 11 of them, because there's the one in high school who's supposed to be really, like, they're all over the place, these
right.
But the one that's on Milwaukee is going to be gone when Giannis is gone.
He's saying, "Come on, big bro, please don't leave. I want to job."
I mean, you have to, if he's on the team, you have to let a more tactful amount of time pass, like a week. But
right.
He's not there for long.
Yeah, you do have to be tactful, though, because Giannis is young enough that you never know if in 3 years he could be a possibility. So you have to make sure that if you waive Kostas, you do this in the most dignified way possible.
Well, so you retire his number, but you still let him go.
You wait till he has an agreement with someone else, then you release him and you tell everyone we did it because he asked us to do it.
Right. Yes, you were giving him an opportunity.
Exactly.
How surprised were you by Doc Rivers, the news of the Clippers and him parting?
If it would have happened right away, I wouldn't have been. The fact that it was 2 weeks later, I was like, "Oh wow, that did catch me off guard. I wasn't expecting that." If it would have happened right away, I would be like, "Okay, this is embarrassing." The second time he's blown. No, he's had a team with a 3-1 lead, and then just some of the excuses that came out of that locker room were just amazing. I had never heard a team that spent all the year load managing and then had a break because of a pandemic say they were too tired in the fourth quarter. And then they didn't have any chemistry or cohesion, but they had enough chemistry to be up 3-1. And then to laugh at Damian Lillard and talk about what they were going to do. And then all of a sudden you lose, we don't have any cohesion. Like I said, when I watched them during the year, I watched De'Aaron Fox just run through them twice. And I said, something about that team is not right. I didn't know what it was. I wasn't around them, but I said, they're not right. And I said, second round, they could be gone.
Yeah. I mean, there has been seemingly like this disconnect, and in the bubble, they were clearly all in different places. And, obviously there were some extenuating circumstances. Montrezl Harrell was dealing with a legitimate tragedy. Lou Williams was dealing with a death as well, but then that spun into a completely different direction.
Wings and lap dances, and did they, yeah. I mean, in a vacuum, I have no issue with wings or lap dances, but I don't. It just, and I was just like, Lou, who are you hanging out with? Who's going to take a picture of? I'm like,
yeah,
right.
And then they were like, that's an old picture. He has the NBA bubble like mask on. I'm like, come on, man.
Oh, dude.
You should have just said he was a fetishist and called it a day.
Like that was
my thing. It's Lou Williams. You don't think anybody would have been like, okay, it's not that far off brand.
I think my favorite part of that whole thing is how so outwardly no regrets whatsoever Lou has been about this whole thing. Like he's just like, yeah, I'd probably do the same thing again. Just make sure nobody took a photo. But yeah, I'd go back to Magic City.
That's how you know he's really from Atlanta, and that's how you know he really does go there to get food. Because, I believe that.
I've heard. I mean, he had talked about it before.
Yeah.
One of the things fascinating about it is how many people came out of like the woodwork being like, yeah, wings are awesome.
I learned so much about like wing culture and like the restaurant scene and all. I learned a tremendous amount.
I've never had wings at Magic City, but I have had wings at other gentlemen's clubs, and the wings are good. I can understand. I can understand hypothetically someone going to get the wings because I've had some very good wings, while being entertained.
I think maybe it's just I honestly have not been in a club for a while, like a gentleman's club. because I know for a long time, like the notion of eating in a strip club just seemed unappetizing just because there's too much uncovered body, like in the vicinity of food.
Until I tried the wings. I felt the same way. I was like, you can't eat in this. This is disgusting. I'm like, well, no, these wings are really good. Just changed the whole perception. You know, I was like, oh, okay.
That really changed my whole life.
Wings.
Who do you think the Clippers like? Who do you think they go?
Who do they hire? Right.
See, that's a tough one because you would assume, you know, you go to Ty Lue if he doesn't get another job, maybe Sam Cassell, but that job has the potential to be really bad in a year. If Paul George and Kawhi both walk, you're probably going to lose Trez already. I mean, that could be a really, you know, they don't have any draft picks basically forever. You take that job. I mean, you could be in a year, you know, in a year going, man, what the hell did I get myself into?
It's also just a weird thing because, like, unless you really believe, like, Ty Lue has a ring and he had a lot of success in a small sample size, but it is a small sample size, even though I know he's really respected around the league. Unless you're earmarking Lue, you know, just because of that part of it. I mean, Ty Lue, that part of his resume, like, there's nobody that stands out to me as like an obvious upgrade over Doc Rivers.
Yeah, and that's the tough thing. And like I said, it's not an easy job to take. You know, I think coaching stars is much harder than people want to admit. It sounds easy to say, well, you got stars, just let them go. But like I said, Doc's coached stars before. He couldn't get these guys together. So, I mean, I don't. You would think somebody would want it's in LA. You know, the owner has money. The owner will spend money. But what if you take that job and then a year, you know, Paul and Kawhi decide they want to team up in some other city? Now, what do you have? You know, wow. you can't bank on using your draft picks to rebuild.
Maybe you just try to do like the reverse of your own OKC deal, where you just get what OKC did, just get a bunch of picks for those
Paul
guys.
George, nobody's doing that.
Yeah, probably not.
After this run, no.
All right, so I got a game for you guys, and it's in honor of Jason, who we talked about before, covers the Sacramento Kings for The Athletic. I've got a game that is different trivia questions about Kings that involve Kings, not the Sacramento Kings, because that would give Jason a huge advantage over Brian.
That's true.
Well, there's no Luke Walton question then?
Okay, real quick. What do you make?
I thought Luke would be the answer to one of the questions. Like,
no, we'll ask the Luke thing before we go. Yeah.
I thought you meant a question about Luke. We'll get to that.
Okay. I'm not. There's no rush. Luke's my buddy. He won't mind.
Okay. So these different questions are about Kings or involve Kings in some way, and you'll each get a chance to answer. It's not you have to answer quicker than the other one. So we begin. The one championship in the Sacramento Kings franchise history, technically speaking, happened in 1951 with the Rochester Royals. The leading scorer in that playoffs was a fellow by the name of Arnie Rison. What was his nickname, according to Basketball Reference? A, Stilts, B, Big Slim, C, Stretch, D, all of the above. Brian goes first.
I'm going to go Stretch because that feels very 1951, although Big Slim is the best one.
I'm going to go Big Slim.
You're both incorrect. It is all of the above. And just to let you know how much the game has changed, old Stilts, 6'9", and was the tallest guy on this team. He was also a teammate of Ed Mikan, George's brother. And that means that the Mikan brothers both got rings. Who holds the record for the most games played as a Los Angeles King? A, Dave Taylor, B, Dustin Brown, C, Luke Robitaille, D, Anze Kopitar. Jason first.
Big hockey fan. Kopitar.
Yeah, Kopitar.
I'm going back and forth between Robitaille and I'm going to say Dave Taylor.
I think it is Dave Taylor.
You are both incorrect. It is Dustin Brown. It is Dustin Brown with.
Oh, it is?
Get out. Dustin Brown.
Dave Taylor second, but it is Dustin Brown.
1,000. Dave Taylor, definitely.
So you guys both sitting on zeros. Henry VI was named king at an exceptionally young age. How young? A, 9 months old. B, 2 years old. C, 4 years old. D, 5 years old. Brian goes first.
I'm going to go 9 months.
Jason.
I was going to say 9 months, so I'll say the next youngest.
Well, you're allowed to say his answer.
Okay, I'm going to go with 9 months.
Yeah, in case that wasn't clear, you guys are allowed the same one.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to go with 9 months.
You are both correct. 9 months
Woohoo!
old. The only child of Henry V. His father unexpectedly died when he was an infant, which meant that he was a king at 9 months old, which just goes to show monarchies are a terrible idea. True or false? Henry III was once gifted a polar bear from the king of Norway. Jason.
I'm going to say false.
I'm going to say
Brian.
true.
It is true.
Yeah.
King Haakon IV gave it to Henry III, and he regularly had, I guess, his servants take it down to the river every morning to swim and catch fish. It sounds like a pretty crappy gig.
Yeah, people did that kind of shit back then.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So Brian up 2-1. Which of these movies, I'm going to name 4 movies, only one of them with King in the title, did not yield an Oscar nomination for either Best Actor, Best Actress, Supporting Actor, Supporting Actress? One of these 4 movies. The King's Speech, The Fisher King, The King and I, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. I guess Jason first?
Okay, now what were they again?
The King's Speech, The Fisher King, The King and I, Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. Only one of these did not get any Oscar nomination for acting at all.
Oh, see, I'm not good on my King movies, so I'm going to say Lord of the Rings.
Brian.
King's Speech definitely did. Fisher King did. I'm going to say I don't think anybody got nominated for Lord of the Rings.
Is that your answer?
Yes.
You are both correct. Lord of the Rings that year won Best Picture, but did not have any acting nominations. Next one, Brian is first. True or false? There was a direct-to-video sequel to The Lion King called The Lion King 1.5, which actually came out after the direct-to-video sequel, The Lion King 2.
That's false. You made that up.
I would say that's false.
You are both incorrect. It is true. The Lion King 2 came out in 1998, and then Lion King 1.5 came out in 2004. I thought that was strange.
Going to kill me.
I thought it was weird too, but it is true.
Somebody was like, "Oh shit, we left a Lion King movie in the vault. We forgot about it."
You got half of a lion.
When I went through that, I was like, "Wait, what?" And I reread it. It is true. Jason goes first on this one. What is B.B. King's given name? Rufus, Robert, Riley, or Reginald?
Oh, as much as I love Memphis, and listen to music, I should know that. I'm not sure. I'm going to say Reginald. It's probably wrong, but I'm going to say Reginald.
What are my choices?
Rufus, Robert, Riley, Reginald.
Riley. That's
It
totally
is
right.
Riley. It is Riley. It was originally spelled Rileigh, and I could not for the life of me track down. His name is Riley B. King. I could not track down what the B actually stood for.
Huh.
So Brian is up 4-2. Which Beastie Boy had King in his nickname? Adam Yauch, Adam Horowitz, Mike Diamond, none of them. Brian goes first.
Houck.
Yauch?
Yeah.
Jason.
Oh man, I'm trying to do the Beastie Boys in my head. MCA. I'm gonna say
I'm
none of
hoping
them.
the confidence of my answer might.
I'm gonna say none of them. I can't think of who would. I can't think of. I'm gonna say none of them.
Oh, it's actually Adam Horowitz. He was King Ad Rock. So still 4-2. No, I'm sorry, 4-3. 4-3. I apologize. 4-3. How many brothers? I learned this. I had no idea. How many brothers are in the band The Kings of Leon? 2, 3, 4, or nobody in the band is related?
like the Doobie Brothers.
Yes. Jason goes first.
I've never heard of the Kings of Leon, so I'm going to say none of them are related.
I once vacationed in Leon. It was nice. I will go with 3.
It is 3. There are apparently, I had no idea, 3 brothers in the Kings of Leon. Plus a cousin.
Johnny Cordova 81. Johnny knew. Sector Cruz.
Thanks for not. Yeah, where was this when I needed it?
So up 5-3. A couple more questions, Jason. You're still in this thing. You're gonna go. Brian's gonna go first on this one. On average, how far does a king crab walk each day underwater? Half a mile, 1 mile, 2 miles, or 4 miles?
Well, it depends if they got to get their steps in on their app. I'm going to go 2 miles.
Jason.
A lot if you're a crab.
I was going to say 2 miles too, thinking an entire day 2 miles.
It's 1 mile, which also I think is still pretty amazing.
It's pretty good.
They do that from depths of up to 300 feet. Also, they have blue blood, it turns out. And during their yearly migration, a king crab can walk up to 100 miles, which, again, I think is pretty damn impressive for a crab. Final question. Brian is up 5-3, but as luck would have it, Jason, this last question just happens to be worth 3. So you have an opportunity to win this thing. A group of king cobras is known as a quiver, a stand, a knot, or an obstinacy. An obstinacy. A quiver, a stand, a knot, or an obstinacy. Jason, I believe, goes first.
I'm going to say a stance.
I believe it's a knot.
You are both wrong. It is a quiver of cobras. A stand is a group of flamingos. A knot is a group of toads. And an obstinacy is a group of buffalo. So
that makes sense.
Brian wins this
thing. They're hard to move.
They are hard to move.
Bunch of buffalo don't want to go anywhere. They're just staying right where they are.
So Brian wins this thing 5-3, but it was a tight match, very tight match. Real quick, the Luke Walton question: how would you evaluate his first season there?
That's a tough one, just because he didn't have Marvin Bagley most of the year. He didn't have De'Aaron Fox a good chunk of the year. His starting center, Rashawn Holmes, missed like 25 games. He made, by the end of the year, Buddy Hield couldn't stand him because he put Buddy Hield on the bench.
Oh, he started playing better, ironically.
Yeah, but don't tell Buddy that. Buddy's, social media liking stuff about going to Philly. And it's like, Buddy, I'm going to tell Buddy, you don't want to go to Philly. I mean, you think you want to go to Philly? You think the people in Sacramento are hard on you? Oh, you don't want to go to Philly. And it's funny for me, following the Lakers, a lot of the complaints Kings fans had were like Laker fans, the rotation. Luke also came in, they had won 39 games the year before. So if everyone's thinking that, this should be a playoff team, but I think actually in this coming season, I think Luke is in a good spot in the sense that everyone assumes he's going to get fired after next season anyway, because it's a new GM. I mean, go ahead and do whatever the hell you want, Luke. You don't have, it's not like it was with Vlade, where there were things Vlade wanted to see that, to work with him. I think Luke's going to go out there and just do whatever he wants, essentially, because what do you got to lose at this point? Because no one expects anything from him now.
Right. I mean, it's tough. We watched Luke, coach his last year with the Lakers with a president of basketball operations who clearly wanted to fire him. Like this was, Magic's desire to go in a different direction was not subtle.
No.
And because of that, it's difficult to operate under those conditions, but we'll see how it goes. Brian, frozen?
I think he is frozen, or he's just
looking at frozen.
Yeah, but I think I know Luke. It wasn't the greatest year, but I do think they made some improvement over the year. I think De'Aaron played better over the course of the year with Luke. So that's probably the most important thing with the Kings, that De'Aaron Fox keeps getting better. But look at the new GM. They're not going to fire him now just because I think financially for the Kings it makes no sense to be paying him, Luke, and his staff. So he'll get at least next year. And like I said, you know what? No one expects anything. Maybe there's less pressure on him because of that. And I like Luke. I think Luke is the first coach I think that I'm older than, which is fun, oddly enough. And I actually covered Luke in college, which is also another oddity that I watched him post up my Cal Golden Bears in the Pac-10 tournament repeatedly.
We covered him as a player. Like it's always a little odd.
So, but being in Sacramento is just a weird thing anyway. It's just always something going on. You had the whole story earlier in the year where the owner sends a group text. I don't know if that, or there's like a story about a text going out, or does the owner support the coach and all that stuff, and he wants him out. So we had all that stuff going on. It was a wild year for Luke, but I think coming from LA, even with that, it's kind of it's a mild thing compared to LA.
Last question. I'm relaying. It's not my question, but from Sector Cruz for you. How many cigarettes does Lottie smoke?
I have no idea, but I did have a few conversations with him while he was smoking, if that means anything. I mean, you'd be like at the combine or something. He's just sitting outside. You just sit down. I'm like, I don't smoke cigarettes. I'm going to sit over here and we're going to, chit chat, but it is funny that, you don't really run into cigarette smokers too often anymore.
Well, especially. Yeah, I mean, especially former professional athletes who smoke.
Yeah, that was one of the jokes about him when he was playing for the Kings. You got to go through his, his pack a day or whatever. I don't know if it was a pack a day, but that was one of the jokes they would make about Vlade. So, like I said, it was tough too because I like Vlade. I know I said cheered for him as a kid, but then some of the stuff he did as a GM, you're just going, "Come on, Vlade, what are you doing?" Just.
Did you ever tell him about going on the bus to that Ralph's?
Yeah, I actually brought the card and showed it to him, and he told me the card was probably worth less because he signed it. That was he said, and he told me, thank you for making him feel old. When I told him I met him when I was like in the 4th grade or whatever it was, he was like, yeah, thanks a lot. I'm old.
We're all getting old.
Yeah.
Yeah,
really old.
It sneaks up on you, man.
All right, man.
This is a ton of fun. Thank you for the hour, and then bleeding over a little bit into the next one. Jason Jones covers the NBA for The Athletic, and does a great job. We've loved reading your stuff for years.
Yeah, thanks,
it's really fun to have you on here. Tomorrow night, guys, we know the finals start on Wednesday. The Dodgers open the playoffs on Wednesday too. It's like baseball is happening. So tomorrow night, and Jason Jones will be watching probably split screen, I think, Dodgers and the NBA. He's going to be. Yeah.
Please don't hurt my feelings, Doc. Please don't do it to me again.
Oh, God. And best of 3, man, anything can happen. It's such a weird, the Brewers aren't good, but
it's kind of like bullshit, honestly, that the Dodgers have to play a wild card the way they dominated that.
In my biggest fear is I'm like, please don't do this to me. I live in Northern California. I have to hear that shit about even years. We've got 3 since '88. I don't want to hear that. Please don't do this to me, Dodgers. I can't keep living up here with that.
It would be pretty painful, I gotta say. I'm not a Dodger fan, so to speak, but I don't dislike them either. And, just being in this city long enough, I know what it would feel like. Oof. That would be just.
I can't take it. I'd have to log off. I have to go in hiding for a couple of weeks. I couldn't do it. I need this almost as much as they do.
Baseball's weird, and it's a weird year, and it makes me nervous. So tomorrow night, though, we'll get ready. We haven't talked much baseball at all. We'll get ready for baseball and all kinds of other things with Lana Berry and Molly Knight. And then Wednesday, it's game 1 of Palooza. Thursday, Mo DeKeel. Friday, more NBA and also a little NFL with Vinny Bonsignor, who covers the Raiders in Vegas now. So lots of great stuff this week. Again, Jason, thank you so much for the hour. It was a lot of fun. Love to do it again sometime.
Oh, definitely. We've got to do this again. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, man, for sure.
Yeah. Cool.
All right.
Tomorrow.
All right.